to this Meridian West webinar. I'm Alastair Beddow, Managing Director here at Meridian West. As you know, we regularly present and bring together experts to present on a range of topics. Really delighted today to say that we're joined by Jim Walton, who's Managing Director, and Paul Croxton, who's the Creative Director, both from Ascend Studio. They're going to be talking with me today all about the topic of brand in professional services. Really exciting topic. Those of you who joined our April webinar, we were talking there about brand tracking, the importance of being able to measure brand. But today we're really talking about almost kind of one step back from that and saying, well, actually, how do you create and come up with a really compelling brand story and translate that into a really creative brand design that's really going to help kind of tell the story for your firm. So Jim and Paul are going to share their expertise. If you've got kind of questions, comments, do put them in the chat and we'll try and come to those as well. And I know we're going to look at a few kind of examples as we go through to kind of illustrate some of that as well. But I wondered, maybe we start just with some first principles, maybe kind of, Jim, why do you think kind of brand is such an important topic right now for professional firms? Because a lot of the research that we're doing is showing this is rising up the agenda for kind of CMOs, marketing directors. They're all kind of thinking about brand. Why is it kind of crucial that firms have a strong brand story to tell in the market right now?
Thanks, Alastair. It's a really good question to start with, and I think what we're seeing is a kind of pivot really from the strategic brand, the B2C brands that have put lots of effort in for the last 150 years, and actually the modelling that they've used is being more accepted into the B2B marketplace. Why is that? Because there is a need for more standout. One of the things Paul talks about a lot is the kind of homogeneity of the markets. What do we actually stand for? And we've seen it recently in a couple of projects that we've been working for in the accountancy marketplace, where firms have come to us specifically to answer the question, what's our purpose? Why do we stand out? What makes us different? And I think that's one of the key reasons. And rather than the past, professional services has been all about identity and logo. I think we're now getting to a point where organisations are more comfortable. They're not totally comfortable, but they're more comfortable talking about essence, purpose, vision, mission. And these are the cornerstones to how we build a brand platform. And we take that work and then push that into what a brand looks like. But fundamentally, it's about building that platform first. One final point on that is that we're seeing much more prevalence for copywritten communications, whether it be social media, websites, as we know, are a huge part of marketing traffic now. And so it's not just what you look like, it's what you say. And that's all about personality. And the final point is it's about values. So what are the values of these organisations? We're seeing a lot of issues with talent, talent acquisition and talent retention. People want to work for firms that stand for something, and that's where brand can make a difference.
That's really interesting, because I think my sense would be that I think professional firms historically reverted to that kind of sea of sameness. It was a kind of safe space because there wasn't a huge amount of differentiation. But actually more recently, I think a number of brands have been quite bold. They've merged, they've kind of refreshed their brand, come up with a kind of new identity, and have as part of that process have been a bit more willing to stand out. And I wonder, kind of, Paul, whether that's your sense as well, because I know at Ascend you work across a range of industries, not just professional services. What are you kind of seeing from your clients at the moment around the importance of brand and why they're kind of coming to you?
Thanks, Alastair. Yeah, much the same as Jim's response, really, in its founding principles there. I think whether it's a B2B brand or a B2C brand or even B2B to B2C brands, we're all ultimately dealing with people. And I think that's where professional services has really woken up over the past, certainly the past 5-6 years. I think we've noticed it, this desire to connect on a more human level. And I think that is driven probably in large part by technology, large part by the fact that we're more connected and simultaneously disconnected than we've ever been before. So that sense of humanity, understanding, authenticity, the more tactile side of brand is very hard to communicate, even if you've got a reasonable strategy. You might have a fantastic looking identity, but as Jim says, you need to work really, really hard to ensure that it's you stand for something and that it's real. We always say find the truth and tell it honestly, and it's a very, very simple principle to try to follow. What we'll show you in a second, in a few slides we're going to show, is a little bit about demonstrating how actually you can get to the nub of that, and crucially convert that into an identity and a tone and a personality and a visual expression of your brand, which aligns with that DNA. And we're seeing that B2B, B2C, we work cross sectors, and they kind of all want the same thing. They want to connect with their audience in a more meaningful way.
And that comes through really strongly, I think, from a lot of the research that we do with buyers and professional services. That idea of actually, is there that fit with kind of values? Is there that fit with the kind of sense of kind of broader purpose? These are things that are, quite quickly rising up that consideration list of factors that people are looking at when they're considering, which firms do we want to work with? And I think therefore having the ability to tell that story really effectively through the brand, I think is going to, it's going to rise in importance, would be my sense. So why don't we have a look then? You kind of talked about getting to the essence, that kind of the authenticity that kind of sits behind the brand. I know there's a few kind of visuals you wanted to kind of share that kind of maybe walks us through the process of of how we actually get to that point of the brand strategy and onto a kind of creative vision.
Sure thing. It's very top level because we've not got long today, so we're going to skim across the surface. We've just selected a few points that can give us an opportunity to talk about things in a more meaningful way in a short amount of time. The only final thing I would say on that last point there, Alastair, which I think is important to mention, is that there is an attitude shift. We were talking about millennials. We're now talking about Gen Z. We're talking about different age ranges and different people want different things. They want different experiences from their workplace, and that is definitely an attitudinal shift and a demand which I think particularly professional services are waking up to as well. I
think while you're finding those slides, Paul, just to fill in while you're looking around on that, the other point we're seeing more is ESG. We're also seeing about B Corp. And these have far-reaching implications within organisations, and we're again seeing those infect professional services market more and more. And because of that, there is a need for these particular attitudes and cultural shifts to be defined and displayed within a brand as well. So with the brands in professional services are becoming multi-dimensional. They're standing for more things. I mean, you mentioned in terms of some of the ways in which you're testing and looking at different organisations. This idea of purpose, this idea of vision, I think it's really radically moved on quite quickly from where it used to be. Sorry, Paul, over to you.
Thank you. So so we're talking about how to translate a brand strategy into a creative vision. Really, actually, this is probably about how to translate a brand strategy into a design strategy. They're the two sides of the coin that we generally try to bridge. So this looks like a complicated, boring methodology diagram, and it kind of is. So that's why we picked a few aspects of this out on the following slides to go into some more detail. But just to give you a general overview, this is quite a typical helicopter view of a process. If you've not been through a brand refresh or a rebrand before, these are the stages which is most likely to go through. A discovery stage, which is absolutely crucial. There's a lot of hygiene factors in there. Who are the competitors, so on and so forth. A definition phase, that's where you start talking about strategy. We're talking about vision and mission, values, positioning. Some of those phrases you'll definitely know. The proposition, crucially the narrative, which is really the brand story, and the tone of voice. So how does this brand present itself? You then, this is the bit right in the middle. I don't know if you can see it on this screen here. There's a little hand holding a diamond there, little icon. That's the bridging point there, where we need to transition. We need to translate a strategic definition through a narrative into a design execution that can be delivered and answer to all the demands which are going to be put on it, from the website to non-visual communications, podcasts, etc., etc. It's about establishing a DNA that can trickle through to every touch point at every time, and it's hard, but the value is far outweighs the effort, I think. We're happy to share these slides, by the way, afterwards, if I'm sure Alastair can circulate. So just to start off here then, so we're talking about positioning, and this is an approach we call brand shift. So whether it is a full rebrand or whether it's a brand refresh, you are undeniably something at this moment in time. And if you're thinking about a change or responding to a change, you are going to a new place. So you are going to transform from one thing into something else, whether it's a minor change or a major change on a micro or macro scale. This will exist in every scenario. So it's just getting this really clear from the start. What actually are we trying to achieve based on this as a destination? And that will give clarity, and it will give structure, and it will give a focal point to all of your efforts.
I think one point on that, Paul, was we actually worked, a good example of that was we worked recently with Meridian West. They'd done a client listening project for an IP firm, and the results that came out of that really segued into why they asked us to pitch for their brand project, which we've just been delivering recently. Some of the anecdotal evidence was that there was less confidence in the business about their own capability than actually the scores from the clients. And so one of the things we went in to do was say, look, you are better than you think you are. We need to create a brand model that actually defines this, gives you confidence, empowers the organization, accelerates it, and moves it forward. And that will be something that's literally being released in the next few weeks. But that piece of research that was done by Meridian West was incredibly useful and gave the foundations for the project we did. So I think that's where we need to start from. Sorry, Paul.
Thanks. So we're looking at differentiators. So you might describe a differentiator as, oh, we're the fastest, we're the cheapest, we're the oldest, we're the something with something. It's normally not one thing, and if there isn't anything that really stands out, normally you rely on, well, it's our people that differentiates us, and almost always it is the people that differentiate in one way or another. But all companies are just collections of people, and they're all very different, and when you put them together they make different groups with different ideas. So it's really key that you get these differentiators down. What is the one feature, what is the one benefit of that feature, and what is the one impact of that benefit that we can start to talk about. Now, you might find that one of those or two of those are the same as a competitor, or that you've heard them before, but it really doesn't matter. What matters is that it's true, that it's real, that it's honest, and it's compelling to the positioning point that you want to take. Okay, and I'm going to show you examples of this for a recent project, a sneak preview or something in a second. So the next stage is about really establishing a DNA. So values, get those values down. We tend to work in 3s, maximum 5 values. The amount of times we've worked on a project and given 15 values that all overlap, and it really is important to nail that down to a few values that really mean something, because the values of an individual, and this is really how you should think about your brand, it's a collection of individuals. So you could assume it's one entity that has its own personality. It behaves in a certain way. It has its own way of speaking. It dresses in a certain way. And that is very true. You can make that, you can draw that analogy very easily and very accurately with brands, and everyone has values, and it influences those three things on the right. So it's very important to get it right.
And just on that, because one of my senses working with firms on these kind of projects is there's an awful lot of kind of personal investment from professional services. Often you're speaking with kind of partners who've got an ownership stake in the firm, a kind of may have worked there for many years, decades sometimes, with a real kind of personal attachment and investment. So I guess my kind of question is, how do you kind of make choices? Because I guess at the end of the day, what you're saying is, this comes down to making some kind of choices on where you focus. Because I think one of the kind of experiences with the professional firms is that you can ask 10 partners, and you can get kind of 10 different answers. So kind of how do you kind of decide where you kind of distill down on these things?
Can I just answer that, Paul? Because I think we've got a couple of tricks up our sleeve when it comes to that, Alastair. We actually use a couple of tools which give us the ability. So we actually we often use a set of 32 characteristic traits that could be assigned as values. And we've done this time and time again. We've done this with organizations of when we've interviewed 60 people. We've done it where we've done it with 3 or 4 partners. And interestingly, they tend to coalesce around a couple of thoughts. The other thing we did when we worked with the Project Anew recently is not only do we ask them what they think are the words that describe them best, but what are the ones that describe them the least. So what we're looking at is we're looking to those kind of anti-values, because actually they give us the ability then to create something that's not just, it's got to be about innovation, it's got to be about transparency, it's got to be about collaboration. They're too wide. They need to be more specific. And so when we've done this, I remember specifically being in a session, an interview session with a partner, and he said, I just haven't been able to do this. And I said, literally, give me the first 3 that pop into your head. He gave me the first 3, and they pretty much resonated with the majority. Well, we ended up with 5 or 6 which had significantly higher ratings. So we can work to it in different ways. I think the other point Paul's mentioned is, although we tend to have 3 values, we tend to then define the personalities that align with those values, the behaviours that align, the tone of voice that aligns, and the look and feel as well. So what we end up with is a matrix, not just 3 words, which can be very difficult to define specifically, but a matrix which gives you a model to work to. So if our value is this is what we should look like, this is what we should sound like, this is how we should behave. And it's far harder to argue with that approach because it's much more structured. And I think that's what people are often missing, Alastair.
No, good point.
People usually firms normally come at it the wrong way. They think you just need to sit down and think of 3 things that are really important to you, and everyone's going to think of slightly different things. So discovering your values is about a process of distillation. Okay, so what goes in means you probably are quite innovative, means you are probably quite collaborative, means you are probably quite whatever. And so when you get to that point, the word innovation or collaboration or whatever it may be, creativity, they mean something, whereas before they wouldn't mean anything. And that's one of the key points about this, is that it's okay to have innovation as a value if you use it in a way which is unique to you. It doesn't matter, there are only so many words that you can choose, So let's go through, because we'll have a look at that in a sec. And then reasons to believe. So we work on an essence. So your essence, really, I'll give you some examples. Volvo's essence is safety. Disney's essence is magic. McDonald's essence is happiness. So these are very, very simple notions that generally underline your efforts, the feel that you want for your brand. Your core attributes. These are basically your superpowers. Okay, so you need a whole bag of them, and you can start picking and choosing the ones which are going to be most appropriate at different times. Don't forget, you've got different audiences: internal audience, external audience, geographically, across different functions and service lines and sectors, and ultimately the value that you create. So what is it that you propose you can actually achieve for your clients and for your colleagues and your team? And that gets condensed into something called a value proposition. I'm sure you've all heard of a value proposition. I'm speeding up because we've only got 10 minutes left. A value proposition. Now, at the top here, it says your sell, okay? But actually, a value proposition doesn't need to be a hard sell at all. In fact, some of the most powerful probably do not talk about cost. They do not talk about necessarily time. They put the entire emphasis on value and what that ultimately benefit that leads the benefit that leads to. So from there, we will, well, this is the process we use, and you'll notice that you'll have seen something like this before. This is a sort of spider chart. Get that value proposition bang in the center and support that with those key differentiators. Okay. From there, you can start to pull off different themes. Okay, so if you have a value proposition which is about, let's say, increasing growth, and your differentiators are about empathy, they're about, let's say, technology, and they're about some opportunity, then you might start thinking, okay, those things coming together are really quite transformative. So perhaps we have a theme of transformation. Okay, from that you could pull off another theme. So okay, what does that make me think of? Okay, so it's like a word cloud basically. I think of maybe emergence. How would that look? How would these things manifest themselves? Then you can start to curate mood boards that support that in a visual way. Okay, so that's a little trick that we use. It's very effective, and clients can really get involved in that with their agencies as well.
Should we have a think about maybe what this looks like in an example? Is there something you can share us that kind of brings us?
Yeah, I've not got that specific. I've not got a duplicate of that in a live. I've missed that out. I left that out, but it was basically too big to put in. But I'm going to run through this very quickly because we've got 7 minutes left. So this is a recent project we've worked on called for PKF. It is in a soft launch phase at the moment, so the new website's not launched. There's some other bits that aren't launched, but it is launched and they've got their messaging out there, so we can show a few bits of it. Not excuse me, not as much as I'd like. So PKF, some of you may know PKF International as they've been known. They are a global accountancy network, I think, with around 250 members across the world. And we've been working with them for the last 12 to 18 months on their brand. So here's an example of that brand shift that I talked to you about earlier. They have moved from an international network to a global community. So the strategic proposition, the strategic recommendation was to move from an international network to a global community for very good reasons. Okay, so PKF international, multiple locations, I suppose, reach, opportunities, perhaps there's a sense of connections, network. It doesn't carry any of the more emotive connotations, more of the human side of things. PKF Global allows us to talk about community, about diversity, about being worldly and inclusive, universal. So you can start to get much softer attributes magnetizing to that you don't get from something as clinical as that. So seems very minor, has a massive impact. Pushing that out, this part of their differentiating attributes, we pulled out 3 of those key attributes. Global, yes, we talked about that. It's always about impact and it's always about community. So global impact community works well. Okay, so now you can see we're shifting from a network about connections and into something which is much more human and emotive. We've got 3 key differentiators for those. So feature, benefit, impact. Feature, example, connected and human, and an inclusive community. Benefit of that is that individual value creates success for all. The impact, global business opportunity. So very functional impact point there. So easy to understand, already starting to carry that DNA through. This is the point about values. Passion, community, integrity. Okay, so they're not going to be unique. Others are going to have those values. What is unique is what they mean to PKF. So passion, we've converted these into active verbs. So passion, be the change. This is something you can do. You can do this in different scenarios daily. Community, belong together. Integrity, stay human. So these are things that you can actually act upon and measure, okay? So that's the difference. Value proposition, growth beyond boundaries, okay? So that has a double meaning: geographical growth in terms of your reach and your business opportunities, as well as growth as individuals, professionally, and together collectively. So to carry that forward, that central concept went off in a range of different directions. One of the key themes we came up was just pushing on their regions. Okay, so the regions that they operate in, you can see them there broadly on the map. We mapped those out, so that actually looks really interesting. And oh, these colors are nice because we're talking about diversity and collaboration, working together, global. So we brought all of those segments together. We literally took them off the map, pushed them together into this cyclical device here, and looked at what does that mean? What's the litmus test back against our strategy? Yes, it feels collaborative. Yes, it's got variety. Yes, it's got a sense of working together. Yes, it feels impactful. Yes, it's got some energy, etc., etc. So that influenced the logos. So I don't know if you know PKF, they had a very sort of spiky, sharp logo before that just did not carry any of those connotations really about being approachable, warm, so on and so forth. Then that forms the basis of an identity. Okay, see, it's starting to impact the words: world of opportunity, welcome PKF. We have things like welcome to our world, starting to get images of people in there. Yes, there's real people, believe it or not, and ideas. Okay, let's do some podcasts. Let's actually connect the wider group to the individuals within it and champion those individuals. So all of those strategic points come through in the activation, down to the words, the colors, the image choices, so on and so forth. In fact, we've even got there, that's a mock-up, but these have actually been made. I saw one this week. We've even got their value statements written on all their notebooks: be the change, belong together, stay human. And that it makes it so easy to use, basically.
I think the key point here is that what we're trying to show very quickly, and apologies because we're absolutely trundling through this at speed, is that if we start off with a really robust research, we can find out why every business is unique. Okay, it's how we say that and the way we say it that's really, really important. I think the next slide is about the fact that we need something that's authentic. Now, this is a challenge, and Alastair, your point about speaking on a partner level, being brutally honest, we try to go through the firm. We try to go from the support teams through. We love speaking with the trainees and graduates. We like speaking to those associates, those ambitious partners that are moving forward. But ultimately, the challenge often comes in terms of basically telling them what their authenticity really is, and that's often a challenge. But if you get it right, like something like PKF, and it looks beautiful and very clean and very linear, what we've shown you, but it was a challenge to get it through there. But this point comes out. Basically, all the execution we're doing now is so much easier. Okay, is this particular program related to our values and our value proposition? Does this look like something that reflects what we're trying to do in the global community? And so finally, it doesn't have to cost a fortune. It doesn't have to take forever. It doesn't have to be contentious. If you have an agency that's got a robust process and you do the research, when clients ask us, why have you done that? The answer is not, well, because it's on trend or it looks pretty or we just like the color. It's because it robustly reflects the research and the structures that we put together. And that's good branding. And that's what we're really, really passionate about.
Fantastic. And I think that example with PKF, I know it's still in soft launch, but I think that just demonstrates what we were talking about earlier in terms of actually professional firms, much more willing to, to make themselves stand out, to do the hard thinking around brands, to kind of embrace creativity, be bolder, than they've been historically. And I think that's a kind of really exciting opportunity. Just conscious of time, so I guess, Paul, Jim, just very finally, any kind of last kind of top tips, thoughts you'd want to kind of leave the audience with before we wrap up?
I've got one quote that comes from the author of Brand Gap, which was one of the slides that we didn't have time to put in. People don't buy brands, they join them. I think that's really, that kind of sums up in a way what we're trying to do here. And I think that's going back to your original point. That's why branding in a much more kind of intellectual way is being embraced by professional services firms, because they realize they need the internal talent to join them in this journey. They need their clients to be much more robustly part of their organizations. So it's about joining brands, and I think that's what's really important moving forward. There was a question about anti-values. Natalie, if you want to follow it up, I'm sure Alastair can link us together. I've got a fantastic kind of 3 or 4 slides that can show you exactly what it looks like visually, and it works brilliantly. So I'd love to show you that and talk you through some of the tricks of that one if you've got time, or if you want to chat about it later.
Fantastic. Well, that's probably a good point to wrap up. Just a big thank you to Jim and Paul, and you've taken us through a lot of eye-opening and interesting examples there in speed run, it feels like. But
we had 57 slides, and Alastair made us cut down to about 20. And I think you were rightly so for doing that, Alastair. So thank you for your experience in that one, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for coming along. And just a quick reminder that next week, our kind of final session before the summer break, we'll be talking about addressing the B2B satisfaction deficit. We've been noticing over the last kind of 12, 18 months a big dip in satisfaction scores for professional firms, talking a little bit about why that might be, and then also some of the ways that firms are actually addressing that. So do join us next Thursday if you can. But thanks again, Jim, Paul, and thanks everyone for attending today. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.